At the Global Investigative Journalism Conference, we asked some of the world's leading experts for their top tips when investigating stories. Using digital data can reveal hidden truths, and it should be accompanied by in-depth reporting.
Hi, I'm Jeenina. I'm an investigative reporter with more than 25 years of experience. I'm the director of the data journalism program at Columbia University in New York, and I also lead a group of investigative fellows doing cross-border data investigations, and we're currently teaming up with some media partners in New York, and they publish the work we do. In order to investigate, you need to connect the dots. So my first tip would be just that. Connecting the dots involves collecting pieces of information from multiple sources and making sense of it to find hidden patterns and outliers that ultimately can lead to relevant stories. Investigating means precisely combining all these pieces of information from multiple sources. Tip number 2, do not trust any data source, because data lie as same as people do. So you need to conduct a thorough investigation about the data itself before starting to analyzing the data. One of the ways to do that is looking into how complete is the data, if it represents the time frame that you are investigating, also sorting by different fields, looking into the extreme values. Sometimes they could be typos and mistakes in the data. And then obviously is finding out who and why collected the data, what's the purpose of it, who paid for it. So all these quality assessment has to be done before you start analyzing the data. Tip number 3, before you start analyzing the data, you have to use your imagination. Imagine how the data was collected, by whom, was there any form involved? If so, then it's good to have access to that form and to see the questions that were asked. Having access to the source of the data collection allows you to make a better assessment and to ask much better questions. Tip number 4, data is full of acronyms and codes, and you need to know what they mean before digging into the data. Usually those weird acronyms or weird codes can take you to places that you otherwise would never imagine. And so by understanding what they mean, you can ask questions and then combine multiple variables and be able to find ultimately better stories. Think about it as if you are interrogating or interviewing a person. What you do when you have an interview, you obviously do research about this person or the work this person does. It's the same with data. Imagine that the fields or variables in a data set are like ladies that you are going to interview. And you need to know everything about each of these ladies before interviewing them. Tip number 5, clean and standardize your data before analyzing it. You need to make sure that all the variables have the same standards, that there are no typos of extra characters in every cell or piece of information. And so once you have your data clean, you can start having the fun part, which is analyzing this data and finding stories out of it. The most important tip is connecting the dots and being able to combine multiple pieces of information from multiple sources to answer a question that you have to have at the very beginning. Connecting the dots always implies going to multiple places, getting a piece of information that can lead you to the second place and the third place and so on and so forth. So that strategy that is usually designed at the very beginning of the investigation totally affects and help you on how to be able to see the whole picture. And connecting the dots, it's an art. And that art is always based in a question or multiple questions. So the strategy of selecting the right data, it's always linked to these big question or hypothesis that you have in your mind and that you know can be answered by connecting the dots across multiple sources of information. One of the examples on working with data started in a class that I teach at Columbia that it's called Using Data to Investigate Across Borders. In that class, we have done several projects. One of them is the Global Shipping Project, where we collected data from multiple sources on the shipping industry. And as a result, we were able to publish multiple stories, one of them related to the cruise industry and how, so we collected data on every single cruise ship in the world and looked into different patterns and variables about each of them. So we were able to prove how this industry is unregulated, how they lobby to avoid regulation. One of the findings that it's not a secret is how every single ship owned by cruise companies in the US is registered in an offshore country. So that means that if you take a cruise and once you are inside the boat, everything that happens there is regulated by the legislation of the country where the ship is registered. That's why there's abuse in terms of labor. International crimes happening in a cruise ship are usually not investigated necessarily in the country where you're from, but in the country where the ship is registered. So all these findings and more patterns were discovered by a group of students at Columbia who collected the data from multiple open source and commercial databases, and we followed all the process from collecting, cleaning, processing, and interrogating the data till contrasting this data with reality.